I ran into a little bit of a snafu while I was clearing out Cruel Act 1, finishing my progression of this act on my solo self-found warbringer warrior build, trying to clear through the last few areas before I could go fight Sif, the very good dog from Dark Souls. And I realized that the gear that I had just kind of wasn't up to snuff. I summoned this totem. The monster does not care about the fact that I've summoned the totem. The totem does nothing. They also just move my totems away from me. My survivability wasn't so hot. And you don't know when you'll get stunned by an attack or survive it? I was missing a ton of resistances. So the monsters are good at ranged and they're good in melee. So how am I supposed to outplay it? What do you do if you find yourself in the campaign struggle bussing and you don't really have good gear? Now, you can obviously go check out the merchants, but they only reset once every time that you level. And oddly enough, at this early progression, especially on solo self-found, you might not have a ton of gold to be able to go and just infinitely gamble for stuff until you hit it big. But the answer that I didn't have was, where do you go to farm when you don't even have the gear to progress to maps, where that's basically where everybody assumes that you'll be farming? That's when I stopped off here in Cruel Act 1, found myself a nice little Bearer of the Rotten Pack, and got to killing her. Not only that, I tabulated all of the drops to see the relative drop chances and also tested against multiple amounts of rarity, some with you basically just be able to find by gambling a few pieces of gear, and even just checking the merchants to see if they have a couple pieces available for you. And later on with a little bit more rarity that I was able to add on to it by adding on a charm and just a few more pieces that I happened to have in my stash. And I really sat down to answer the question, is there a good progression farming target in Path of Exile 2 for people like me who maybe were struggling a bit, again, didn't get great drops as they were progressing through the campaign themselves, and haven't quite made it to the end game, so they can't quite rely on the significantly more efficient systems there. Because even when we're talking about like mid-level pieces of gear with tier ranges on their affixes from 1 to 8, there are pieces of gear that you may very well wear for a number of hours, even this early on in the game. This ring, for example, helps to answer a ton of questions that my build was lacking. But I was looking for pieces of gear like this. Not perfect, but more than good enough for me to continue pushing on. So I set out to tabulate everything that we got and try to derive some meaning from this. I initially started off with 32 magic find, increased rarity, and I just set out to catalog all the different things that I dropped, anything that would be of value. You know, a random advanced shield here with increased block chance, armor, maximum life and strength. That would be a huge boost to my survivability on my swap. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't good enough. Sure, I did 50 runs, and on stream it took me about 2.5 hours as I was gabbing along, but I wanted to make this efficient, and I wanted to get a really good idea of what this would look like. So 50 runs wasn't going to do it. So I did 100 more runs. This time with a different amount of magic find, increasing how much I had, eventually adding on a charm to add on even more magic find per kill. And the data that I collected was a lot stronger and not a lot more pointed, as well as just giving better insight into what you should expect trying this yourself. But for all of this to make sense, we kind of need to understand what makes a target like Bira so valuable. Why is this even a good option for you in the first place? Attempting to implement how I would go about farming in Diablo 2 in Path of Exile 2 requires a couple different things. One, we need to be able to find the thing that we want to kill. And while there are a ton of bosses in this game, as well as just random, rare, and elite monsters walking around, being able to consistently get to and kill a target that we know is going to have 6 drops means that we can very efficiently farm towards that target. Killing things along the way is obviously nice, maybe hitting a chest here or there, but we want to be really, really efficient. And on this character, just going straight from the waypoint and running straight up to Bira, which luckily enough, her tile where she spawns is basically smack dab in the middle of Clarifel. If you just run straight north from the waypoint, you will always find her. Similar to that, the tile is easily recognizable because it has this really cool ramp up with these dead, like wolf bodies leading up to it. It's all frozen over and cold, but she also has a voice line that she says when you're close enough for her to have loaded. And even on my character, when I was initially not using any mobility skills at all, I only had 10 movement speed on my character, and I was taking the time to kill packs along the way as opposed to trying to just dodge through them, picking up the gear, getting back to town, selling everything off, and then going back and resetting the map was really only taking me about a minute per repetition. Minute per repetition means 60 runs per hour, 60 runs per hour with 6 item drops, with that being a combination of gold and items, sometimes 3 drops of gold, sometimes all the way down to 1 drop of gold, where everything else would either be a higher form of currency or items. Means that you're generating 360 drops per hour, which is definitely not bad considering this is so early on in the progression. Remember, this would only be about Act 4, that you're really able to kill this target with very little power on your character, making more room for increased rarity than you normally would be able to enjoy trying to struggle through a progression point that you're already blocked at. Since this area is level 45, while I don't fully understand how that impacts the level of rare and boss monsters in an area, I found that she was able to drop advanced gear, meaning the second quality of gear, so like normal, advanced, and then expert, which already opens up a ton of the base stats for things like armor and weapons to be valuable enough where you can really sit on them for a very long time without needing to upgrade them. And I saw items dropping all the way up to tier 8 for their affix pool. To give you an idea, this means that we're in the triple digits for maximum life and mana. We're in the high double digits, like 70 to 90% for percentages of increase to armor, evasion, and energy shield. Larger than 20% resistances across the board for fire, cold, lightning, and chaos. And while I never personally got lucky, I think you're able to hit 20 and 30% movement speed at this point as well. So the stat range for gear that we're dropping here is good. The quality of the items that we're dropping is good. And now we just need to see if a reasonable amount of increased rarity on your gear nets you a good enough return on rare items and valuable magic item bases that crafting from this point wouldn't be a complete crapshoot. You'd have a decent chance of getting an upgrade. But I did just put together a very quick picture of just an absolutely garbage collage of all the things that I found that I think either had good enough stats to warrant showing to you, or was something that I might be able to use as a transitional piece. Go ahead and pause the video right now and let me know if I missed anything here, because I'll be honest with you, I actually salvaged the vast majority of the gear that I had because I was really only looking for upgrades. So please tell me if I took something that was potentially valuable and tossed it right in the trash. Thanks. I don't know why I want to feel bad about this, but it'll help to educate me about things I should be looking out for in the future. And let's go ahead and look at what we tracked and what the outcomes were. So first and foremost, we did 100 runs on top of the 50 runs, but this set of data is just the 100 runs because the amount of magic find was so different. Cataloged how many drops there were every single time. It wasn't always 6 drops, which is kind of interesting. Of these drops, we were typically getting 3 gold drops, and this would typically average around 1,000 gold before you take into account any of the items that you would then sell. And typically these items would sell for another about 1,000 gold, so I would say each run was about 2,000 gold. Is that a metric ton? No, absolutely not. Is that good enough to every once in a while go and gamble for a new amulet? Absolutely. In fact, the amulet that I used for this testing was just a randomly gambled amulet that happened to hit on gold, which means that has the implicit of increased rarity. It then rolled with evasion and rarity. I regaled it and it hit rarity again. So I was super happy with this piece. But of the total of 596 drops, 24 of them were orbs. Now, including in these orbs, I'm also counting things like regal shards, as well as I think we hit like 1 desert rune and 1 chant shard as well. I do have a breakdown of orbs right over here that we can check out. 13 of the items were normal, so they were not magic, rare, etc. This means that they were bases that you could hit with an alch orb, so it wasn't completely useless, but it wasn't something I was necessarily looking for, so these amount of drops trying to mitigate that as much as possible was my desired outcome. 264 of the drops were magic items, 53 were rare items, 2 of them were uniques in this set, although I think in my first set, yeah, we actually hit 3 uniques in the first set. That's just RNG for you. And while this isn't super important to a lot of people, I think mostly how many items were superior might have a little bit of a value here. 12 of the items were superior, so we're able to take those and salvage them and be able to increase the quality of our own gear. When we look at the percentage of these drops, gold made up about 40% of it, orbs was about 4% of it, normal items only a measly 2%, magic items was 44%, rare items was just under 9% of our total drops, with uniques representing 0.3% of our drops. And what that meant was, on average per run, we would expect to get just under 6 drops, with about 2 to 3 of them being gold drops, about a quarter of these being an orb drop, meaning every 4 runs you should expect to see 1 orb type currency. You'd see a normal item about 1/10 of the time that you did a run. You would get just about 2 to 3 magic items per run, and about 1 rare item every 2 runs, with sometimes 3 rare items would drop, sometimes 1 rare item would drop, sometimes I wouldn't get any, with uniques basically expecting to drop them almost none of the time. But here, if you were to do a whopping 100 runs, you expect to get 2 of them. So with an expectation that we're basically getting a rare item every 2 runs, that means that we were hoping to generate a rare item every 2 minutes. With this being able to be significantly faster if I just had more mobility on my character, or something more powerful than shield charge as a mobility option. But dropping a rare item once every 2 minutes on average, with a huge amount of magic items dropping in that same amount of time, did really offer us an opportunity for a lot of different outcomes with the potential of being able to craft on them. Because while most people are probably just looking for rare items, I find often that my best luck comes from finding a really good set of magic items and then regaling it to hit a 3rd viable stat, meaning that bare minimum, no matter what else I do to the item, I'm now going to be able to use it. Something like these strength and hybrid gloves with a huge amount of maximum life and already a good resistance stat here, meaning that hitting this with a regal is probably worth my penny. Same story here, body armor starting off with near triple digit maximum life as well as high resistances right off the bat. And while I'm not personally looking for a one-handed hammer, I did just want to point out that we were hitting things like this with a huge amount of ED or percent enhanced physical damage here, as well as flat physical damage, as well as another just generally good stat in accuracy. Even weapon bases, we're starting off with a good enough array of stats that would give us an opportunity to be able to, again, hit this with an Exalt or 2 and see what the outcome is. Like this bow right here, while it got blown out due to resizing and all of that, it starts off as a zealot bow that rolled with over 100 accuracy and +3 levels to projectile skills. I think that's worth a regal orb. The only other thing to take from this data set here is what the orbs that dropped were and what their prevalence was. So across 24 separate orb drops, like I said, we got a couple random ones here. So a Chant Shard, a Desert Rune, as well as a Gemcutter's Prism, which I was actually really happy about. Then we got a total of 15 Regal Shards, 3 Transmutation Orbs, and actually 3 Exalted Orbs from her as well. When we were dropping an orb, we were expecting it to be a Regal Shard the majority of the time, but dropping something like a Transmutation, an Exalted Orb, or even a Val Orb wasn't unheard of. In my first data set of 50 runs, we actually dropped 2 separate Val Orbs and no Exalted Orbs at all. I just thought it was wild for this to be happening. I understand it's all RNG, and obviously the Magic Find is playing into that a little bit, but I just wasn't expecting to see these types of drops at this point, because I basically thought the best I was going to be able to make an argument for was just kind of getting some base items until you got lucky later. We were actually able to do a lot of the crafting that I wanted to do while doing these runs, giving me upgrades to the gear that I was using. And just to kind of let you know, like, was this worth it? Like, did I get anything out of doing 150 runs of Bira of the Rotted Pack, or am I just going to go back to struggle busing? The answer is yes. I started off by posting the ring, right? Like, this is a fairly massive upgrade for what I had previously. We got a huge upgrade on our boots, really nice upgrade on our armor. We actually got a decent upgrade on the helmet that I would like to be able to craft on more, but I just kind of ran out of bonus Exalted Orbs. I even went about and found like a pretty decent amulet at this point too. And I also just found enough currency to be able to add on some additional stats to the gear that I was already using. So I was able to slam on some additional fire res here. Not to mention I got like a pretty decent shield to be able to put on my offhand so I can use that with shield charge. I also put together enough quality to be able to upgrade the quality on the pieces of the gear that I didn't already have. I found enough runes just randomly while doing this, while also killing monsters while I went along as well. I actually can't fit them into the stash space that I already have because that's all filled up with the Infernalist run that I did previously. Like, my stash tab is actually pretty full with all the stuff from my previous character. People keep telling me that I need to buy additional stash tabs, but it's just like, I don't know, man, and it all kind of fits in when I, control click over here. I think it's working out just fine. But at this point, I actually want to post a question to you all. Is this a thing in Path of Exile 1 already? Have people previously explored this? Is this something that's just been completely written off? Like, maybe everybody is just really good at this game, has great builds, and never gets stuck in the campaign? Or have you been asking a similar question? Also, on top of that, have you found any better targets for actually doing this? Like, Bira is right here, and that's why I initially started thinking about it. But my first thought was, like, obviously an Act boss, right? But they're all take fairly long to get to. Like, if I wanted to go kill the Act 3 boss right now, I have to run all the way through to get down to Dr. Robotnik's lair, fight him for a very long time before I would get these drops. It just didn't seem as efficient. I would love to hear from the experiences of other people who are looking for similar options, or perhaps tried something else and just found it to be a lot more engaging, either better for their time spent, or overall was a better strategy. Please, this is like the best opportunity that I have to be educated by a large amount of people simultaneously. I'm all ears. If you're brand new to the channel, you liked the video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss out on anything that I bring to the board here. Diablo 4's Season 7 is right around the corner. Yes, I do play, or at least attempt to play every single ARPG, and Diablo 4 is my main game. So you've been interested in that. Maybe you just started up into ARPGs from the PoE scene. You've been trying to get into that game or get a better understanding of it. You don't want to miss out on that as well. I predominantly cover the Necromancer. I'm the Necromancer class lead for Maxroll. So that's what kind of content you're going to find here. So if you like Necro Boys, a big old army of undead, and you want to see how to do it good, you're going to want to stay around. Leave a like on the video, comment with whatever you want to do. It helps the algorithm a ton to be able to push this even further to other nerds who might be interested in this type of content. But that's enough of me shilling for myself. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps in some way, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.